So what you're looking at now is not Philips Hue, it's not SignalRGB, it's not Govee, and it's not fancy LEDs. And my guess is, by the end of this video, you'll be just as excited as I am about this new Ambilight option. Now, the number one question that I've gotten over the years on my SyncBox and SignalRGB videos has always been, will this work with my TV's built-in apps? And the answer to that has always been no, but today that's all about to change. Kind of. I'll first start out with the awesome news. Someone was finally able to create an Ambilight WLED compatible Android TV app, and guys, it's absolutely incredible. So let's first go over how to get that set up. I'll be using the Glidopto 4D Elite WLED controller, which I have used in many of my projects. Then I'll use some of my go-to 12V SK6812 individually addressable LEDs. These have 60 LEDs per meter, and for an Ambilight setup, you really do want to use something that has a dedicated white option like these. Now, you could just use an extra JST connector and plug the lights in and you're all set, but I always like to connect my own 18-gauge silicone wires to the beginning. And one of the reasons I do this is because I never really know where I'm going to be putting the controller in relationship to the beginning of the lights, so I can just connect some long wires to the strip and then cut them down to the perfect length I need when the time comes. I'll speed through this part, but if you are interested in learning how to solder, I'll leave a link to a couple videos I made going over the easy steps with close-up footage and detailed commentary that I highly recommend checking out. Alright, so for the TV, I'll be installing the LEDs in the back of my 65-inch Sony Bravia 8. And what really helps is I found these corner LED mounting clips on Amazon that work great for making the 90-degree turns that'll first stick on the corners. Then I'll start bottom right and work my way up around the perimeter, and once I get back to the beginning, I'll cut off any extra lights. And I will mention at some point you will need to count the LEDs. I have 47 on either side and 85 on the top and bottom. Once that's done, here I'll zoom in closer so you can see how nice the corner turns worked out, and on this one in particular, the little clips aren't covering any of the LEDs. But on a different corner, you can see how they are covering up some of the lights. If that happens, I just snip off the plastic piece and everything still stays put, but this way I won't be getting any dark spots or weird shadows on the wall. Then I'll zoom in bottom right so you can see how things look where the LED strip begins and ends. For the controller, I'll use some 3M sticky pads and attach it to the back side of the TV. And placement for you will probably depend on where you plug everything in, but this is where I can now cut off any extra length I don't need and connect the LEDs to the controller. I'll put the TV back on the mount, and for power, I'll be using a 12V 3A supply, which will be more than enough for the LEDs. Now, if you're maybe installing this in your living room where you have great Wi-Fi, you can skip this part. Me, however, I'm in my basement that gets horrible Wi-Fi, so what works best is I have about 5 of these little wireless hubs that I can place anywhere around my house. Then I can run my Ethernet cord from one of the 3 openings on the back right up to the WLED controller, and this gets me much better performance. Go ahead and plug everything in, fire up your TV, and go to the App Store. There is a free version called ScreenGlow that lets you set up one strip and gives you some basic customization, or a paid option called SceneGlow that's much more robust. Either option would work perfectly for this basic setup, but I for sure said take my money and paid for SceneGlow. Once the app is downloaded, you should see a screen that looks like this. Now, before going into setup, you need to first make sure you have your WLED configured. For the strip behind the TV, I have my brightness limiter turned on and set to 2900 milliamps. Strip type is SK6812. For length, I have a total of 264 LEDs set to the GPIO 16 on the controller, and Auto Calculate W is at dual. Once this is done, I can then go into setup on the SceneGlow app. The first thing you'll do is put in the IP that's assigned to your WLED controller, and that can be found right here in your WLED app. UDP port defaults to 4080, and the output FPS is at 30. Then I put the total number of LEDs in this field, but if you wanted to add another segment of lights connected to the same controller or add a different controller altogether, you can do that as well. However, since we just have the one strip, I'll remove output 2 and move on. I kept the performance diagnostics off and make sure to do the white balance calibration. I'll leave the Home Assistant section blank and hit save. Now we need to go to customization. Capture resolution is set to 320 by 180, and depending on your TV's hardware, you can go higher, but 320 by 180 is all you really need. Then for my WLED output 1, I'll go into basic settings. Lighting used is set to ScreenGlow, brightness cap I have at 100%, smoothing set to 50, black threshold at 4, white suppression at 100, and motion sensitivities at about 40. For LED sync delay, on my TV, the lights that I installed changed faster than the content on the TV, so I added a 40 millisecond delay so that everything syncs up perfectly. Next, for fixture geometry, physical layout is screen perimeter, edge depth is 10%, and here's where I tell the program where my 264 LEDs are. 47 on the left, 85 on the top, 47 on the right, and 85 on the bottom. Then make sure to input where the lights start at, and for me, they were installed bottom left and going in a clockwise direction. In the effects settings, I have the scene change slider a little bit past the halfway mark, and this will smooth out the transitions from one scene to the next. And last but not least, color adjustment. Here I have brightness at 75, saturations at 175, and gammas at 2.5, and everything else I kept at 100. Go ahead and hit save, and then you can start seeing glow. Now, I've probably done more Ambilight videos than anyone else on YouTube, and I can confidently say that you're going to be blown away by the accuracy and zero delay performance. But what's so cool about this is that I can use any WLED controller, any LED strip that I want, and create a truly customized setup. So I know many of you watched my SignalRGB projector setup video that requires a PC to be the source, but the AWOL Ethereum UST projector's OS is Android TV. And yes, I was able to connect all the strips I had in this setup to Seeing Glow, and it worked flawlessly. And when I say pinpoint accuracy and zero delay, here's a perfect example. I'll go frame by frame in this shot and pay attention to right here. Watch as the streetlight enters the frame and how literally at the exact same moment the LEDs behind the screen light up. And this goes back to being able to control the delay in the settings to get things to completely sync up. So Seeing Glow is obviously using screen capture technology, and as expected, there are the usual limitations when it comes to DRM content. But if anyone has found a way around this without having to pay Philips Hue $130 for their Sync TV app, please let us know, because that's pretty much the final thing preventing us from truly having a complete solution. Well, that about does it for this one. I'll leave you with a lot more footage of everything in action, and I will leave the link to the Seeing Glow app in the description, or you can pause.